or dry cat food.
Impossible.
Webster is next on BCTV.
Good morning. There is a forgotten highway in British Columbia which everybody uses but everybody in a certain way ignores. And that is a 35-mile stretch of the Fraser Canyon between Yale, in fact, and Jackass Mountain, where 19 people have died in the past 14 months. And because it's far away, you don't see that much coverage of it. But it can properly be called carnage in the canyon. 2 dead, 4 dead, 1 dead, 200-foot drops, an absolute shocker of a situation. Steve Wyatt's going to give you a special report on that this morning. The forgotten highway. In Victoria, waiting to be questioned by Webster this morning, is Jack Heinrich, the Minister of Labour in the Social Credit government, who is under, perhaps properly, considerable attack for his lack of being front and centre in the very bad labour climate in British Columbia at this moment. Also in the studio this morning is a troublemaker called Ken Paff from the Teamsters for a Democratic Union. He's from Detroit, and he's up here to plug trouble in the Teamsters Union. This morning, too, I may get a chance to give you a little bit of an explanation about the PCBs and downtown office buildings and whether or not, if you work in any of them, you should in fact be terribly concerned or in a panic. And given the time this morning, I may draw attention to British Columbia's new 007. Another top official appointed from Ottawa, where he was very high in the security, the spy business, is now working for the government of Victoria, and his name is Robin Bourne. But first, to Labour Minister Heinrich in Victoria after the break. Good morning, Mr. Heinrich, Minister of Labour in our Social Credit Government of Victoria.
Good morning.
Mr. Heinrich, Kinnaird of the BC Fed is threatening more regional strikes if management doesn't alter its attitude of confrontation. Will you stand by, as you did during the Vancouver Island regional strike, and do absolutely nothing and watch the Labour Code being flagrantly broken by those who take part in a mini general strike?
Well, that's very difficult to answer, Jack.
Well, you could tell me yes or no whether or not you did, in fact, as I allege, stand by and do absolutely nothing when all kinds of contracts were broken for the moment, and of course Section 88 and 79 and 84 of the Labour Code were grandly ignored.
Well, that applies to just about every law in the country. If somebody is bent on inducing its violation or inducing employees working for people totally unrelated to the dispute which was at hand, and they're bent on doing that, there's sometimes very, very little which one can do. I made it abundantly clear at the time what I felt, that it was wrong. In many cases, in most cases, matter of fact, it was illegal and certainly unfair. Now, the real question is this. There's a delicate balance right now, and are we going to preserve our democratic systems? It takes everybody to participate in that regard. And I'm well aware of the pressure which was placed upon me, and it's still there. There's not any dispute about that. But it's just not exactly that easy. Sometimes these matters can be resolved, and probably much better in a quiet way than seeking confrontation with those involved.
Doesn't that mean, Mr. Heinrich, that the Labour Code doesn't mean a damn thing, and that if Kinnair does pull off a general strike, you'll sit back and say, oh, let's not have a confrontation? And does that not mean that your Labour Code, of which BC has been, to some extent, justly proud, isn't worth the paper it's written on?
Well, I think the Labour Code fulfills a very important function in our community. For any law to work, it requires the people who are involved to have the will to make it work. It's demonstrated over a number of years now that it is a superb piece of legislation. There is some problem with it. The fact of the matter right now seems to me that there's more than just a position taken by the senior executive in Labour, but it seemed to be, in my view, combined with political overtures. If people and Labour is well aware of the value of the Labour Relations Board and the Labour Code of British Columbia. They have worked in the past very hard to make it function properly. If somebody wishes to move out and go beyond what the Labour Code says, this is another problem.
But you won't tackle it. Let me ask you a straight question, Mr. Heinrich. Is it, and you must have taken legal advice on this, is it legal or illegal for the Federation of Labour to incite or take part in general strikes where their unions have valid contracts? Now, is that legal or is it illegal?
In my view, that's illegal.
Why don't you take action?
Well, because it's sometimes difficult to do so. Do you expect, or do the people want government to intervene like this when there is a violation of a contract between a particular union and a group of employers?
If you wanted to ask me, I would say yes, people do want. Take the situation in Vancouver City Hall, which has offended many people, whereby, with or without the complicity of CUPE, the Vancouver City Hall is jammed tight with garbage all around the front door, and everybody sits back. Matter of fact, Mayor Harcourt told me that he made a decision with the Police Commission not to interfere in this mass garbage attack on the City Hall. Now, is that gutless or is it not gutless?
Well, I don't think it was the right course to follow, because the fact of the matter is the people who were involved in the information which was passed on to me, those people were in fact permitted to place their garbage on City Hall by those who in fact were holding the pickets around the City Hall.
That's right, the pickets were either not there or parted like the waters of the Jordan.
Well, I appreciate that. And the fact of the matter is this, that in my view is wrong. The question really is this: because of the acts of a certain few, it's very difficult to, or let me put it this way, I don't want to see the process of collective bargaining and all of the instruments that go along with it destroyed as a result of acts by some. And this is rather dangerous. The fact of the matter is, if the Police Commission was aware that that act was to take place and dumping garbage in that area, I think and I understand, as a matter of fact, that the appropriate, not necessarily remedies, but the appropriate investigation is taking place. And
Harcourt told me, Mr. Heinrich, to cut through all this, that they made a decision not to prevent the garbage from being stacked up in the City Hall because it might have created a troublesome situation.
Well, I disagree.
It's laughable, you know. The public looks at it and says, what the devil's going on? Nobody wants violence, nobody wants trouble. But, sir, with respect, I also get the message from you this morning that if Kinnair pulls his general strike, and he's quite capable of it, that you'll do nothing about it.
No, I don't think that's... The question really is, you know, what is available to be done? What tools are available to the government? One, there can be a strong statement. Secondly, there is a provision in the Labour Code that those who, in fact, picket will picket, and can, if it is a lawful picket. The problem that we've got right now is a decision in 1976, I think it was, from the Labour Relations Board, which has the support of a decision, as my understanding, the Supreme Court of Canada. And the problem is these alleged protests are not directed at the employer, and therefore the employee has the license to, in fact, leave his job. Well, I disagree with that decision in this particular case. It wasn't the same in my view, as the protest by the BCGEU with respect to the government when they were protesting the matter of pensions. In this particular case, we're talking about employees and employers who had absolutely nothing to do with the dispute at hand. Absolutely nothing. What it was a demonstration of is a great deal of might and power. And in my view, it was a wrong. It was a violation of a true democratic process.
Oh, agreed, sir, all the way. I know that both of these judgments very well indeed, and the BC Fed takes the position that any political protest strike since the AIB ruling and since the BCGEU ruling on pensions is now perfectly proper, providing you don't picket your own operations. But you and I know that, in fact, that's a breach of your labour code and action could be taken.
I beg your pardon, that was a what?
We know it's a breach of your labour code. We know that the employers could take civil suit or you could take action under your labour code.
Well, there's another provision in here as well. And while I realize there are some employers in the community have been a little upset about what's occurred, remember something else, that if one particular party is desirous of inducing a breach of contract, and that, that's all that the employer and the employee have when they make a collective agreement. They've got a contract, and it's understood during that period of time there will be no work stoppages other than if should a grievance occur and something like this is resolved and they come to bat at the Labour Relations Board. They come together to try and resolve those disputes. But that's all the employer has.
And of course, they can get no help from the government.
Well, let me say that this matter is really under review, and it's under some pretty serious review right now.
Okay, you're reviewing the situation. You're preparing for the worst, perhaps, and we'll continue the interview with Jack Heinrich, the Minister of Labour. Thank you very much, sir. Immediately after the break. Mr. Heinrich, so that I don't misunderstand you or misquote you, I gather that you've told me that you're going to review the options available to you under the Labour Code or anything else if the Federation continues its policy of hit-and-run mini-strikes if the employers don't change their attitude. Is that right?
That's right.
Now, I had a certain sympathy with you on the telephone strike, sir, because, in fact, you had no jurisdiction. Correct?
That's right.
Are you happy it's over?
Yes, very.
Are you happy that Davy Barrett is getting the credit for putting the parties together?
Well, what I'm delighted about it is all over, but of course you and I both know that's not, your last statement's not quite right.
I don't know that, Mr. Heinrich. Convince me. I understood that Mr. Barrett had taken some delicate work, was the first man to phone Reagan, the Labour Minister in Ottawa, and the result of that, you and Premier Bennett then got into action on the telephone. Is that right?
Well, I can't speak for anyone else's actions, save and except my own. And the facts are as follows with respect to my involvement.
Please.
I traveled to Ottawa on the 1st of February. On the evening of February the 2nd, I discussed the matter with Mr. Reagan. I had a special meeting with him at 6 o'clock that evening. And I asked him to come out because I felt that it was getting quite sensitive and I could see some things happening. And of course, that was before the coup d'etat took place.
Right.
Then he came out Thursday night. He was out on another matter as well. The following week, after he had had an on-site really look at it all, Bill Kelly, who's the Assistant Deputy Minister of the Federal Ministry of Labour, arrived and put forth a superb effort. There was one problem. We know what the problem was. That was followed by Mike Collins, who also did a superb effort to remove that particular issue aside, and then another item came. Now, while this was going on, there was also a conversation by the Premier. I was present while that conversation took place, and that conversation was with the Federal Minister of Labour. Then, apparently, there was something, the leader of the opposition had some proposal. And what I know is this, that everything collapsed on Thursday. I'm not really going to discuss publicly what I feel the reasons were for that collapse, but I will just tell you this, that when you're involved in a labor management dispute, and such as BC Tel, which was, and they were locked in, and make no bones about it, they were locked in tight. I felt Thursday afternoon it collapsed. I was advised Thursday at 6 o'clock, and what I did was this. I felt I know very well that I do not have jurisdiction, but I've got to see if I can help somehow. What I did was contact a former law partner of mine who I'd practiced with for something like 15 years.
I used to work with him when he was a newspaper reporter. You mean Alan Hope, the sole and independent arbitrator of the
Yes.
20-odd men?
That's right.
Good man.
And that was right. So I had a long discussion with him about the merits of the case and ways in which we could break the
Look,
logjam.
I'll give you full credit, Mr. Heinrich. Won't you give Barrett, the NDP leader, and I'm provoking you because he was active behind the scenes, a smidgen of credit?
I will
A
give,
smidgen.
Yes, I will give anybody any credit who has made a constructive contribution towards the resolution of the dispute.
Did Mr. Barrett make such a constructive contribution?
You know, I honestly cannot tell you that.
Be generous.
I will be I
don't
will
be
be generous
chintzy.
with you, but I will tell you one thing that bothers me, and I want to make this point clear. When someone comes into the House, asks leave for the House to make a statement, makes a statement of a formula resolution of the dispute, and then leaves the House and puts the expectations of everyone out as to it's going to be resolved, suddenly, you know, it collapses Thursday afternoon. I don't know what it is. The point is you cannot resolve these things through the media on that basis. And I think it became quite evident when Thursday afternoon it all dropped. If Mr. Barrett has made a constructive contribution towards that, you know, I'm quite prepared, and I mean this to anyone who makes a contribution. It's grateful because it was a difficult scene.
It's a good trick you better learn when you're in opposition, though, how to slip yourself into it, you know, because you haven't been in opposition yet, but it may not be long until you are in opposition.
Go on, we're doing very well.
Oh?
Yes, we are.
Lovely. I love the way you put up the taxes 16% and a $6 billion budget when you're supposed to be the right-wingers who are going to help us to hold down the costs.
Well, my question to you then, Mr. Webster, is this: what particular services in the area of health care, education, and human resources are you prepared to take it away from?
You shouldn't have asked, Mr. Heinrich. I am sincerely convinced that there is much wastage and overstaffing in non-essential areas of our $2 billion health budget, which, if properly tackled, could reduce the costs without affecting the services.
Well, you had your innings there, and perhaps it'll be examined.
Okay, next question. What are you going to do about this 11,000-member strike on the lower mainland of Vancouver, the filthiest city in North America, not excluding Detroit, from whom I have a guest this morning? What are you going to do about it? Just sit back and let the people of the Greater Vancouver Regional District go crazy? Are you doing anything to knock the heads together and get some kind of reasonable settlement, or will you tell me only it's a democratic process that can last until Christmas?
Well, Mr. Webster, let's have a look at this. Do you believe in collective bargaining?
Yes.
All right, then. And do you know that there are certain pressures that come to bear when people bargain collectively?
Yes.
Do you feel that that I'm an economic divinity and I should be stepping in to say what the rightful wages are for one person 1 year or 2 years from now?
I certainly think you should be giving some kind of example in your wage settlements, which are not ahead of the private sector, and I think you should be imposing yourself publicly, giving guidance and leadership to employees and unions in this province. Because as it's going right now, if the IWA goes out, the Lord help this province this summer.
Well, we can also look back to 1980 as well. You know, there are equivalent number of people involved in the construction industry as there are in the forest industry, roughly 45,000. And it was difficult in 1980. There were a number of difficult disputes. The problem right now is this, and as you know, as I seem to see it, I'm beginning to wonder if there is a real will to bargain in the traditional sense. And I think that's quite evident.
Don't you think that public service employees, those who depend on the taxpayers, are nowadays too greedy?
I'm not about to make any comment like this at all in view of the fact of the bargaining that is going on.
I know, but I just
hope you
hope
couldn't expect me to either, could you?
No, as a new minister, I would hope you would put your foot in it.
Would you? Well, I suppose one day that will happen, but I just managed to get out of that one, did I?
Okay, you did. And anyway, you're just watching it closely, and you'll keep your fingers in the pie. You won't interfere. You'll just let the democratic bargaining process carry on with the Cupid strike.
Let me answer or ask this question then. In each municipality, there are elected people.
Right.
Each municipality is, in many cases, a part of a greater bargaining network.
Right.
It's also the position taken by the union. Now, do you think that they are not capable of reaching a dispute? You know, although
Of reaching
there
an
have been...
agreement. Oh, they're capable of reaching a dispute. They're not capable of reaching an agreement.
Yes, but tell me this. Many of these people, I think, are coming very, very close with the assistance of the mediation service. The mediation service has been in and out on a number of occasions. I don't think it's in the interests of anyone, particularly when there has not been any demand made by any municipality or any trade union with respect to this.
Anyway, you're standing by to help whatever you can. Let me finish on one final note.
Yes.
The OTEU involved in the ICBC are very unhappy with you. They came over to see you in Victoria, you wouldn't see them. They say that the management of ICBC will not see them. There are now 300 locked out, 140 on various kinds of strikes. And the Hewitt won't talk to the OTEU, and they're on the verge, I think, of pulling a total strike. Do you anticipate that such a strike will happen, or do you plan to take any special measures to try and pacify the 1,100 employees of ICBC?
Well, the question really is, I'm aware that the head of that particular
Fred
union,
Trotter.
Mr. Trotter, was in Victoria. As a matter of fact, and I do know that he tried to reach me. I remember I came up to my office out of caucus one day, and apparently he had gone. But it wouldn't have made any difference. The fact of the matter is, they have been requesting the appointment of an industrial inquiry commissioner. But you know, before such appointments are made, as far as I'm concerned, we require the consent of both sides. Because what you're doing is going into another level of bargaining. And the fact is, there is no substitute, absolutely no substitute for parties to meet head-on to be the author of their own agreements. They know each other best. That's called bargaining. That's called collective bargaining, free collective bargaining in the traditional sense, and it seems to me that's probably the route that everybody should be going. Many people come in and say, well, our case is different. Pretty soon, there's nothing but exceptions to the rule.
In other words, you're telling me quite logically that you cannot wave any magic wands, and you do not feel we face any major crisis in the CUPE and VMREU strikes at the moment.
Well, I will say I'm very concerned, but I'm not going to put it in the category of a major crisis.
Right. One final question, sir, to which I'm sure you can give me a short, straightforward answer. When are you going to set up the inquiry asked for from you by the coroner's jury in that tragic death of the 4 construction men down the building? When are you going to set up an inquiry to investigate safety practices in the BC construction industry? When?
Yeah. That was a tragic accident, and you know, you just can't say enough about it. So I think probably
everyone understands.
Okay, I will tell you, I have within the Ministry of Labour what we call the Construction Industry Advisory Council.
Right.
We had a preliminary meeting on the 11th of March, which was just after the coroner's jury had handed down its recommendations. And then that was followed by a formal meeting which was held by the Construction Industry Advisory Council and the Safety Committee a portion of that council on the 16th of March. And I'm waiting right now for some suggestions to come out of this.
Do you want to see a public inquiry?
Well,
come on, that's an easy one.
Will it be helpful?
Yes.
You really think it'll be helpful?
Yes.
Well, sometimes I wonder if everybody were to pull up their socks, you know, and find their 2 best helpers, which are at the end of each arm. Maybe we could do a little bit more.
But you really must, in this case, I think, sir, go for a public inquiry. I mean, needn't be a long and lengthy thing. Just witnesses and the construction firms and the faults and your WCB inspectors. Yeah. Surely that's not a difficult thing to do, sir.
I don't think that's an unreasonable request on your part, and I will tell you that is certainly one of the options which I'm considering. But I think it's play it. You know, I want to be reasonable about this thing, and I don't want it to be a sensational item, because from what it stemmed out of is not exactly you know, the most pleasurable thing that occurred.
All you need is a construction man and a head union man and a place to hold a meeting and ask for witnesses. Take them on oath.
There's some merit in what you say, Mr. Webster.
Mr. Heinrich, the best of luck. You're going to need it, especially if Kinnaird pulls more of his mini general strikes, which many members of the public, not just employers, and many union members,
yes,
regard as highly dangerous, damaging, and illegal.
I agree with you, and that's the expression of a feeling which is coming my way. The problem
That's the
is,
strongest statement you made this morning, that you agree with me.
well, I agree with you, but one of the problems is this. It would be in the interest, I think, of everyone if we were to address the problems between labor and management and stay away from the overtures into the political forum, because it seems to me many statements which are being made are backed up or coupled immediately with something with respect to the government. And I don't think that's the answer for the rank and file and their employers.
Oh, no, have aid and comfort from the fact that when Mr. Barrett ordered the people back to work in the pulp and the IWA, he lost the election.
Yes, I remember the Continuing Collective Bargaining Act, I think it was called, in 1975.
Mr. Heinrich, I know you have a cabinet meeting, and thank you very much, and I hope we can have at each other again when you've made up your mind on what you're going to do on one particular issue.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Next, Ken Paff, the Teamsters TDU from Detroit. Every now and again, I get leaned on by Lahovic and the boys, who try to convince me that the Teamsters Union is in a dreadful state in Canada. And they bring somebody in to whip up the troops. They don't seem to be doing that well. But fair is fair. I use Senator Lawson as a resource person from time to time. So I'm going to use Ken Paff of the Teamsters for a Democratic Union International Organizer from Detroit, Michigan, about the upcoming IBT convention on June 1 in Las Vegas. You don't seem to be doing that well in your revolt against the Teamsters hierarchy, Ken.
Well, I think we're making some progress.
Tell me about your progress.
Well, here in BC, which you just talked about, for the first time in the history of Local 213, they're going to have to hold an election, which is currently going on, for delegates to that convention. Now, this is because of our activity.
You mean to tell me that in Local 213 they've never held elections for delegates to an international convention?
That's correct. In other words, they've always just illegally appointed them. But now, because of TDU, they have to at least begin to respect some democracy
Not
within the
illegally
union.
appointed. They appointed them and you challenged them. Did you challenge them in the courts or in front of the international?
Well, we didn't have to litigate this because, see, there was a law. For example, the Local 213 sent a letter, which I saw last night, to various members, and it said that because of the U.S. Landrum-Griffin law, they would have to hold an election for delegates. Well, that law was passed in 1958, and they never chose to enforce it until 1981, 23 years later, because this is the first time there has been any opposition, any watchdog organization.
So this is Vlahovic. It says here, a motion by Vlahovic forced 213 Executive Board to obey the provisions of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters Constitution for electing convention delegates.
Yes, this is correct. In other words, they...
Well,
they
that's
had
a
to
nice procedural victory for you, but doesn't mean necessarily that you will elect your rebellious delegates because you're very small in number in BC.
Well, when you come to our convention and you talk about elect, you see, one of the problems with our union, and one of the things that we're going to be doing at the convention, is we can only elect our local officers, the top people, the people with power. Your Ed Lawson, who you mentioned, he's the director of Canadian Teamsters. He owes his job to one man in Washington, D.C., Frank Fitzsimmons. He was appointed by one man under our Constitution to be the director of Canadian Teamsters.
And you will concede that under your Constitution that is a proper appointment?
Well, it is
a legal appointment?
That's correct. That's what we're seeking to change in our Constitution, to have the right to elect these people up to and including our general president by the rank and file. Let all the Canadian Teamsters vote for Ed Lawson or anyone who chooses to run against him. Let all the Teamsters in North America vote on Frank Fitzsimmons. These people are completely insulated from the members.
Well,
they're all making well over $100,000 a year from multiple salaries. I believe Ed Lawson has 5 or 6 salaries. He's got a number of pensions lined up.
Leave the generalized slander of Lawson alone. He hasn't got 5 or 6 salaries.
Slanders when you say something false.
Well, it could be for all I know, and I don't know what you're telling is the truth, and Lawson's got a habit of suing and winning, so unless I know it beforehand, you're not going to use it.
All right.
But what I'm prepared to let you do, tell me right now, accurately, is how Fitzsimmons is elected under the Teamsters Constitution. Is he elected by the International Board?
He's elected by the International Convention, which is held every 5 years.
Who votes the
in Las
International
Vegas.
Convention?
A series of people, I'll list them. All the international officers are there as delegates. All the appointed organizers are there that Fitzsimmons himself appoints, including, for example, his sons.
As voting delegates?
Yes. The Joint Council level officers and delegates from the locals, who are predominantly the local officers. There are a small number, less than 10% of the people, who are rank and file Teamsters, such as we have here in 213, who will be able to go run for election as delegates, say whether or not they will support Fitzsimmons or Lawson, whoever they want to pledge themselves to, and go to that convention. That's less than 10%. Less than 10%
Of the delegates at the convention.
of the delegates at the convention
You don't vote a membership like they do in the British trade unions, do you?
No.
You cast one vote as a delegate.
one vote as a delegate.
You don't have to vote solidly, say, all the 213 delegates don't have to vote the same way.
No, that's correct.
And are you telling me that 213 is the first and only Teamster local in North America, which is now going to elect its delegates?
No, I didn't say that. I said less than 10%. Not only this local. We have elections, say, where I'm from in Detroit, in several locals there, including Frank Fitzsimmons' home local, Local 299, which was formerly Jimmy Hoffa's home local.
And
we will be running delegates from those locals, but only a select few locals get to elect delegates. It's a certain, they have to be of a certain size, and they have to be of a certain type with
Well, under
relationship
this
to the
land of
business
Griffin
agency.
law, can they not all vote for delegates, like you're going to do in 213?
No. No, because if it's a smaller local, they will just send their chief officer.
Just the one.
Or they'll send the chief officer and a few others that he will pick
All right.
from the executive
How many
board.
members in the Teamsters Union in North America?
About 1.8 million.
How many members of the TDU, without exaggeration?
8,000.
8,000.
But
Jeez,
you can't compare these two numbers. This is apples and oranges. These are, the 1.8 million are the total number of members in the union. We're not a union. These are the active ones, our 8,000. We have support in the hundreds of thousands. We believe that if there was an election held here in BC, and we'll see how we do in the delegates, we'll see who the majority stand for.
In other words, you've got
will they vote for the rank and file delegates, or will they vote for the people that Lawson
You've got
supports?
8,000 activists
That's
in the
right,
TDU.
activists. We feel that our support, as measured in elections, when we put up bylaws changes within locals, we normally get a majority vote. When they allow a vote, after we have to go to court or something just to force an election within our own unions, to change our bylaws or to elect our officers.
What makes you so... Oh, he wants me to take a break. And then I'll come back to Ken Paff, international organizer. How much you get paid, Ken?
$11,000.
By whom?
TDU.
By the 8,000 activists?
Yes, they donate money in
11,000 a month?
per year.
11,000 a year.
Yeah, I
Highly
hope that
paid-
I'm worth a little more, but because we're just a rank and file group,
Highly paid troublemaker.
we have to keep our salaries at an absolute minimum.
Ken Paff, 11,000 a year. TDU up here to plug a meeting. When's the meeting?
Tonight,
Where?
At 7:30 at the Rio Hall, which is at Kingsway near Joyce at 3325 Kingsway.
To which all unhappy Teamsters are invited.
Very much so.
All
Happy
of the
ones
unhappy
too.
ones. Happy ones too.
All of them.
After the break.
We want them all.
Ken Paff. Hey, listen, I have a dreadful image of Detroit, and I made a snide remark about its garbage. Is it as bad as I think it is? As the image is supposed to be?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it's that bad, but the bad situation we have in Detroit really is the unemployment. With the automobile plants, the automobile companies relocating their plants in the south or overseas, it affects Canada too, Windsor at the very least.
Okay, back to the TDU. Why was it formed and when was it formed?
We were formed after the last convention in 1976.
What do you mean the last convention?
The Teamsters hold a convention every 5 years. At that convention, our General President Frank Fitzsimmons got up and said, to those who say that it's time to reform our union, and to those who say that it's time for the officers to stop selling out the members, I say go to hell. Now this was a direct quote from our General President.
What year was that?
1976, June.
Well,
we were
that's-
formed 3 months later.
1976 and 5. Well, that's right, 80. So that's 5 years. Every 5 years you have a convention.
That's right. That's the minimum required by law in the U.S.
What's your basic grievance? I mean, we all know about Hoffa. We all know he's buried underneath a concrete freeway somewhere.
Well, that's a sorry
Is that
comment on
right?
our union officials, too. That,
But we all know that Bobby Kennedy was out to nail him right reason or none and probably did put him through improperly or illegal in a number of the wiretap charges, right?
Yes, I don't challenge that, but the thing about that is it's a sorry comment when while the murderers of Hoffa, and it's virtually certain that he was murdered, disappeared for almost 6 years now, that the murderers of Hoffa have not been apprehended. All the suspects that the FBI is looking on are associated with high officials of our union. They had someone who was apparently going to turn state's evidence, Bruguglio, in New Jersey Teamsters, and he was murdered to cover up. Provenzano is in jail for first-degree murder. He was one of the suspects, but in checking on the Hoffa murder, they found out he murdered another union member and put him in the cooler.
And then there's another
And his
guy.
brother sits on our general executive board, Sam Provenzano. He's a respected member of our general executive
And
board.
then there was
of Teamsters.
another guy who was on 60 Minutes the other week. His name?
Fradiano.
Fradiano. Is he one of yours?
He has made certain charges about Jackie Presser, who's one of our highly paid millionaire. He's a millionaire union official. He states he's a millionaire.
Now,
He's
what
made
about
it off
you
our
people?
union.
What do you talk, as everybody talks about, especially with international unions. Look at the trouble in the Carpenters Union and the other unions. Sweetheart contracts, unorganized non-union operations. Is it not a fact that the Teamsters in North America and in Canada have some of the best contracts in labor in this continent?
Yes, we have some of the best and we have some of the worst.
What would your
and
worst
here's the
be?
problems.
Go on.
Here's the problem. Let's take even the best. The best we have in the United States, we have what's called the National Master Freight Agreement, which is a big trucking transcontinental agreement. This agreement is being totally eroded. Approximately half the number of people work under it now who did some years back, although there's more and more trucks. Because the Teamsters have allowed the agreement to erode, they have signed sweetheart agreements to allow certain companies to get out of the master to get under substandard agreements. We have under
You can prove that.
under
I
our very
presume.
best contract right now, the National Master Freight Agreement, in the Midwest, at this very moment, in the past few months and in the months to come, they are giving away the 5-day work week. Can you imagine that? Something that people fought, our fathers fought years ago to get, the 5-day work week. They're going to say to the employers, you can work these people any 5 days you want. You don't have to give them weekends off and make Saturday and Sunday an overtime day, but you can give someone Tuesday and Wednesday off and pay no overtime on the weekends. So much for going to church or a union meeting or having time with your kids on the weekends. And our union officials are putting up no fight against this. It's left to us, the TDU. We've been able to stop it in a number of areas against our own union officials who stand hand in hand with the employers and try to give away what we've got. So our contracts, a lot of them are good, but they're going downhill. They're going downhill. And a lot of our contracts weren't any good to start with.
You've
So
got some good Canadian contracts.
I'm sure that there are, especially in the trucking industry. Some of our agreements are very good, and we're proud of them. Those agreements were fought for by us, our brothers, and our fathers. They weren't $300,000 a year union officials that got us these great contracts. It was a strong union that got us these contracts.
So your basic fight there for is to have what you regard as a democratic convention in 1981 and 1986, whatever it is, so that there is a true reflection of the wishes of delegates who are not afraid to vote against Fitzsimmons.
That's exactly correct.
Well, but Fitzsimmons has been there for 100 years since Hoffa, hasn't he?
Yes, well, although he says he's going to run again, we definitely believe that he will retire this time.
Is he not well? Did I see something?
He's not well. He's not well.
Who is his successor
Well, we don't-
under his regime?
We don't know yet. They haven't, so to speak, chosen their man. There's some competition among the top
Did
people
the
to see who will be the top dog.
TDU cast any appreciable votes in the 76th convention?
No, we didn't exist at the 76th
Didn't.
convention, but one of the things helped us form was one member from Fitzsimmons' own local, Pete Camerata, one delegate out of 2,000, stood up to them and made motions like if someone's convicted of taking bribes from an employer, that he be removed for life as a union officer. And this kind of thing was shouted down. He made a motion that they limit their salaries to $100,000 per man, shouted down. And they had to beat him up after the convention to make an example of him. And this was one of the catalysts. The real beginning of the TDU was these arrogance on the part of our top officers. They're so arrogant toward the members. They think they own the union like a business, like their own private organization.
How come you people are so squeaky clean? I've been around a long time, you know, and I tend to take a cynical view and say, okay, and I say this about some areas of politics too. I don't really
Right.
believe they're bona fides. And that really what they're looking for is their turn in the pork barrel tomorrow.
So we'll get in there for the big job.
Yeah.
too. Well, okay, let's say this then. This is what TDU says to that. We say no matter who's in there, let's have control by the members. Let's limit the authority of the officials over the members, have reasonable elections by the members for all the positions of power, not have multiple positions where one person can hold 7 paid jobs. So where's the checks and balances? You start to appeal to a higher level, you find the same person running the show.
Okay,
You know?
my conscience is clear. You're having a meeting tonight
Tonight,
at the Rio Hall,
7:30.
3325 Kingsway, Vancouver.
Right.
7:30 for Teamsters in British Columbia to come to a TDU meeting.
We invite them to be there.
Oh, well, you should have some clout, shouldn't you?
I think so.
You might get a dozen people there tonight.
I think we'll do a little better than that.
All right, get one of the guys to phone me tomorrow and give me an accurate count of how many turned up.
Okay.
Will you?
And we'll tell you what happened there as well.
Can't take phones to you this morning because I've got to do my Canyon and the Carnage about Teamsters and truckers and whatnot, and then I've got some other stuff to do. My thanks to, regards from Senator Lawson. My thanks to Ken Paff. I'll be back after the break. A couple of weeks ago, a truck driver came in to see me. His friend had been burned to death in a tragic accident in the Fraser Canyon. And as he gave me some of the basic figures, I was quite appalled. We see on television, on the news hour, all the local mayhem on the highways. But when it happens, and this is understandable, in the Fraser Canyon, in the winter time or in the summertime, it's too far away. The wreckage is gone by the time we get there. So I sent Steve, with the cooperation of the RCMP, thank you very much, and the Ministry of Highways, up to look at this forgotten highway as far as coverage of death is concerned. 19 deaths in 14 months, 35-mile stretch. And here is Steve's report.
Jack, the Trans-Canada Highway is a lifeline between the BC interior and the Lower Mainland. But a 35-mile stretch through the Fraser Canyon near Boston Bar has claimed 19 lives in the last 14 months. Last December, for example, a semi-trailer nearly collided with another there on 9 Mile Bridge. One of them crushed through the guardrail. The driver was killed as his truck plunged 200 feet into the canyon. This picture tells the story. The northbound trucks have an uphill passing lane. That lane is also open to the opposing traffic going downhill and south towards Hope. That center strip is otherwise known as the suicide lane. Combine that with volatile weather and bad driving and you get death on the highway. The accidents start 8 miles north of Yale. Last August, 2 killed in a 2-car collision. 1 mile north, 2 killed in a 2-car collision. A half-mile further north, in late August, another truck driver is killed. Bradley Hill, 4 people killed in 3 separate accidents between August and December last year. Near the Hell's Gate tram, 2 killed in separate accidents this winter. The death toll since January 1980 stands at 19. Sergeant Ron Halvorson of the Boston Bar RCMP says the reasons are as varied as the victims.
On this particular accident, about 200 yards south of where we're standing, in the early part of August, there was a 2-car accident with 2 people dead as a result of the accident. It was a head-on sideswipe type of an accident.
Now, what were the road conditions like at that time?
At that time, the roads were wet. There was a light rain. It was the middle of the afternoon.
Okay, let's drive down the road a bit and find out where some of these other places are where they've been happening.
Okay, sure.
Because this is a major artery, the 6 officers at the Boston Bar Detachment regulate all kinds of traffic, and in heavy volumes. In the past year, there have been 184 accidents. 46 have involved injuries. 15 have killed 1 or more passengers. The number of fatalities has doubled, but that has more to do with luck than driving conditions. The difference between life and death can be a matter of 2 feet. Okay, right now we're about a mile north of where we started, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Right. Now, we're on the Spuzum Creek Bridge. Tell me what happened here.
Well, early part of November, where the bridge bows out down there, there was an accident involving 2 semi-trailers. One very slightly involved. The other one hit the bridge, ricocheted across, and as a result ended up just behind us at the end of the bridge. There were 2 persons killed in that accident.
Is that a pattern in this area? Semi-trailers, semi-trucks?
I don't know what you mean by a pattern. There's a very heavy traffic flow of commercial vehicles through the area, and as a result, there's probably a higher number get involved in accidents than other places. But I don't think on a percentage basis they're any higher than passenger vehicles.
Now, you can look at this road, and it doesn't look that bad. Is this just a strange circumstance that these accidents happen here?
Well, again, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of it is the terrain, and if you're not, if you do get involved in an accident, you don't have second chances in a lot of cases. The traffic and the weather conditions on this particular night were good. The road was damp in places, but mainly dry. It was a late evening accident, but there was no ice, no snow, and it wasn't raining at the time, as I recall.
Now, I think they burst into flames, and
This particular one did, yes.
Does that present a real problem to you? And the cleanup must be horrendous in these sort of things.
It takes a lot of time. In this particular case, the road was closed for maybe 2 to 3 hours while the fire burned out. We don't have firefighting equipment in the area, which is a bit of a problem to get the fire out in the first place. But then a tow truck to move the stuff off the road, it does take a lot of time and ties traffic up for an inordinate amount of time.
The scars on the highway remain long after the wreckage is cleared. This one happened in late August. 2 semi-trailers collided head-on and burst into flames in the early hours of the morning. Several hours later, police were still clearing the wreckage. One driver was dead.
It's typical of a commercial vehicle accident because of the loads they carry and this type of thing. Again, on this particular road, it wasn't bad. We didn't have to stop traffic because of the 4 lanes involved.
Is that unusual? You have 4 lanes here, 4 lanes, and it seems like a perfectly normal, easy road to drive on.
Yes, this is probably one of the better sections with the 4 lanes. There's a very slight curve and a very slight grade involved here. It is very seldom we get accidents in this area.
Because of the heavy volume of trucks, police have dealt with some spectacular accidents on this highway. But only a third of the 15 fatal accidents since January 1980 have involved semi-trailers. And it is not so much the road that is the menace as it is the landscape. Within a 42-mile stretch, there are 5 climatic regions, and the weather has been known to change in an instant.
Rod, we're very close to the Hell's Gate Trail, which everybody who's been through this road knows. Now, what happened in this area?
One person was killed, involved a passenger car and 3 semi-trailers, which was just across the road from us at this point.
How did that happen?
Well, on that particular night, as was mentioned earlier about the quick, sudden changes in weather conditions here, 100 yards up the road was wet and, braking, and that was good. From the corner here down, it was glare ice. The accident in this case was one car was on the road, or whatever happened, I don't know, but it was stopped, and a semi-trailer came around the corner, saw it, went to maneuver around it and couldn't. His truck wouldn't react and hit it. And then the chain reaction started with 2 other semis running into his vehicle. There was 3 or 4 other vehicles, semi-trailers and passenger vehicles, in the ditch for another 100 yards behind. But again, that's a prime example of a sudden change in temperature.
Nowhere are the problems inherent to the Fraser Canyon Highway more apparent than here at Bradley Hill. Between the middle of August and late December last year, 4 people died in 3 separate accidents. For a long time, the Department of Highways has been studying the passing or suicide lane. The operations manager for this area is Bob Veitch.
There is an ongoing study has been taking place regarding 3-lane sections for the last 5 years.
Get rid of suicide lanes.
Well, I don't know whether that's the name for them, but certainly the RCMP has been involved with our traffic branch in headquarters, and they have been studying the ramifications of do we or don't we stop passing going downhill.
Yeah, is that going to happen? Is that a new policy?
I understand that the word has come out to us now that the policy is established that we will put a double solid line on 3-lane sections so that there is no passing legally going downhill.
No more passing going downhill. Now, double yellow lines are not going to stop anybody if they're in a hurry. Isn't that true?
Well,
I mean,
I think that people's attitude must be that they should obey the law, and then certainly that if they do obey the signing, then it's safer for them, and that's what we're interested in.
Now, generally speaking, there seems to be an inordinate amount of semi-trailers involved in these accidents. Now, do the facts support that, or does it just seem coincidental?
I'm not sure that that's a factor. There is a lot of truck traffic in the canyon, and I don't have the figures in terms of the percentage of trucks versus cars. I would say that fatal accidents, if there is a truck involved, obviously it's a big object, and certainly that would tend more to have a car become involved in a fatal accident.
Now, I've heard a truck driver tell me that highways doesn't come out here and sand until somebody's dead. How do you respond to that kind of argument?
Well, it's not true. That's about all I can say. We have a policy of, in the Fraser Canyon here, of 24-hour coverage, 7 days a week. This is during the winter months.
Now, Ron, what about this thing about the semi-trailers? From your experience, you patrol this road every day. Now, is there a pattern in these semi-trailers getting involved in these accidents?
I really can't say that there's a pattern of accidents involving semis. We get complaints, numerous complaints about the operation of commercial vehicles from passenger vehicles. On the other hand, we get complaints about passenger vehicles holding trucks up on hills, slowing down and then speeding up from the commercial vehicles. So there's a pattern, I guess, but it's one against the other almost.
Two-way street, so to speak. Everybody's got to play fair on the road. Is that put it simply?
Yes, that's right. Again, I mentioned earlier about over-driving to the conditions, and I think they apply probably more so to a commercial vehicle than they do to a passenger vehicle. I don't think that's a pattern in what you meant, but that is one of the observations I made in this area.
By the time the tourist season rolls around again, it will be tougher to pass on this stretch of the highway. But because of the weather and the landscape, it is unlikely much else.
Number of things I want to talk about this morning, including the new 007 in Victoria. Notice smile on face? It's a joke, see? Well, partly a joke. I want to talk about a story that was in the province this morning about PCBs traced to 5 downtown office buildings and whether or not they should be panicked in the streets. Shouldn't be. But I haven't quite got it all sorted out yet. Sometimes difficult to raise people between 6 in the morning and 9 o'clock. And what else I was going to talk about?
Extra billing.
Oh, God bless Monique Bejan. A Liberal finally did something good. The Federal Health Minister said any provinces which allow extra billing are liable to lose their federal health contributions. That'll put the boys in their place in Victoria. It might give Nielsen some backbone to say what he should have said long ago, that there will be no extra billing under Medicare in British Columbia. In the meanwhile, however, I believe I've got some calls on Steve's excellent piece of reporting on the forgotten highway between Yale and Jackass Mountain, 19 dead in 14 months. From Kamloops, go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
Joe Whitten. I'm a truck driver.
Uh-huh.
I drive the canyon every night.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the guy that writes all the letters.
Mm-hmm.
The editors up here. How come that the Department of Highways hasn't fixed the bridge there at Spuzzum Creek yet?
It had just happened. How long before was it, Steve? You mean the broken railing?
The railing is still bust. They haven't repaired it. Same thing up at 9 Mile Canyon where our buddy from Merrick dropped 600 feet straight down. They haven't fixed that bridge either. What do they want us to do?
No, there are temporary boards in that, but you're right. There's still a big hole in that first one, which is where?
Spuzzum Creek?
Spuzzum Creek.
Spuzzum Creek.
Spuzzum Creek.
Yeah, that's where those two guys from Abbotsford laid on their side and the guy had his head torn off.
Oh, don't give me the details, please.
Well, okay, go on up to 9 Mile Canyon. They haven't fixed that bridge railing yet either. That guy dropped 600 feet straight down before he died.
Steve, you better ask the Highways Department when they're going to fix these holes. Mind you, the bridge doesn't, the railing doesn't do a bit of good if you're coming down a 130,000-pound semi-trailer.
It'll sure stop a car if a car hits it. What if a car hits that bridge right now?
Oh, look, are you glad we did the piece?
Come again, Jack?
Are you glad we did that piece?
Boy, I'm telling you, Jack, I could come down there and kiss you. I'd kiss any man right on the cheek to get them damned highways guys out of their bed down there and get some sand on that road. That's the absolute 100% God's honest truth when they say that they won't sand it until somebody's dead.
Steve went into that fairly solidly, and I was talking to some truckers this morning. Matter of fact, they were in the office with a guy from the TDU.
Yeah.
And they are prepared to concede that the Highways Department does the best it can, but there may be many a stretch of black ice of which nobody is aware at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Jack?
You know perfectly well you can have black ice in one part, a thaw in another part, on freezing rain on another part of that highway.
When Sonny Thorpe burnt to death 2 or 3 weeks ago at Spence's Bridge, that guy come down at 8 o'clock with a load of sand, and he said, "Don't you holler at me, I work day shift." There was a night shift on, and my letter to the editor said, night shift, because there was no sand anywhere. Nowhere on that road. We couldn't even stand up.
There is a 24-hour sanding crew, I know, and I know there are problems, but the object of the exercise this morning was the principal thing, whether there's black ice or no black ice, is what speed you're traveling on the highway.
Sure, it's what... Jack, when I run up and down through that canyon every night of the week, I know what I can do and where I can do it.
But even you don't know. If you've got a double trailer behind you with 132,000 pounds on you,
Yeah.
what can you do if you hit a strip of black ice and you're traveling at 55 miles an hour?
Same thing I used to do when the waves used to come over the ship when I was in the Navy. Pray.
And hide.
Pray, boy.
Anyway, we'll check the highways on the broken bridges,
Yeah.
and we'll do a little piece tomorrow morning, perhaps take a clip out of that, and find out when the railings are going to be back in place again. Although, as I say, it doesn't do a damn bit of good for a semi-trailer, but it might help a small car.
Might help a small car, Jack.
Good call. Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack, I'm a commercial traveler, and I drive between here and Alberta considerably. And I know at times that I get completely frustrated coming along the freeways, not because of the conditions of the roads, etc., but an awful lot of these semi-trailers, or trailers that come down, going up the hill, they're fine. They stay in their lane, and you'll be traveling at your 55 or 60 miles an hour, whichever the case may be. But on the downhill grade, they come down and they actually intimidate you. They're right in your back window, and if you don't go beyond the speed limit.
You know why, of course. He's building up speed to get up the next hill.
I realize that, but regardless of the situation, the speed limit is set at 55 or 60, whatever the case may be. And I know that these fellas have to get through to make up their time. I realize this. But the conditions of the roads, because of it being hilly and a lot of climbs on it, and I know I've had them, the lights, especially in the early evening, the lights right in my back window that I was afraid he was going to be right in on me. I've done that with many, many, many trucks. I know that they're in it to make a living and they have to make time up, but at the same time, there is a speed limit. They talk about
Oh, I agree with you entirely. And the other point that we didn't get a chance to raise this morning, last summer when I was off the air, I remember being horrified by a report which I later saw in the papers and saw on television, that some fantastic percentage of trucks stopped by the RCMP in the interior of British Columbia were defective in one way or another.
Yeah.
Remember that report?
Yeah.
60-some% of the vehicles didn't pass the RCMP roadside checks for brakes and safety equipment?
Yeah.
It's terrifying, but you're right. I've come down some of these long stretches with a huge truck battling behind me, and you don't know where to go.
That's right. You get in those three lane areas, and you're going uphill. As long as there's no traffic coming at you, it's fine.
But I'll tell you this: the next time I drive through the canyon, I'll know something that I didn't know before Steve did that report. That 19 people died in 14 months between Yale and Jackass Mountain.
And you know yourself driving through that area that basically the conditions, other than those which we have no control over, like such as the black ice, etc.
Can I see that telemation again on the air?
Pardon?
I was just asking the crew a question.
Yeah, as they say, except for the Mother Nature with the black ice, basically those roads are in fine condition to drive on. They're 3-lane, they're 4-lane.
Well engineered.
Basically, as far as I'm concerned, I put down in so many cases, it's the driver. It's not the road.
But it's not just the truck drivers.
No. It's the drivers. I'm talking about drivers in general. I've tried as much as possible, and I know I've done the same as everybody else. I've broken the speed limit on occasion. But I try as much as possible.
Okay, but let's get the message across loud and clear. That stretch of highway in the canyon is a killer, it's dreadful, and that it's the responsibility of the driver.
That's right.
To follow the limit, or less than the limit, depending on the weather.
On the conditions, that's right.
I'm much obliged, commercial traveller. What do you sell?
Well, I'm in toys and games and stationery.
Toys and games? Well, I don't have many toys except little things like this, which I'm going to throw up again just to impress on you. Let's see the telemation on the location of the accidents.
Yeah.
Can we flash the little stars? There we are, Yale, North. Again, another one. Let's see all the wee stars. Flash them.
That's good. That's good animation. I like that.
So do I.
I'm involved. amateurishly with home movies, and these are the sort of things I like to do, the titling, etc.
I remember in the good old days in radio, I could come in a golf shirt and do whatever I liked and sit behind there smoking and looking my reprehensible self.
Now you have to look beautiful like you do.
I wish they'd get that camera up higher and hide this chin. Anyway, it's a good message, a good report by Steve. We'll check on the holes in the doohickeys and we'll take a break and come back for a free-for-all after these messages. No sooner said than done. Here is our friend Bob Veitch, the operations manager for the Highways Department, and I must admit that I accepted the hole in the bridge at Fraser Canyon. When will that be repaired, Bob?
As soon as possible, Jack. Right now we have cables strung across there and tightened up with tension on them so that they would, in fact, stop a car if it did hit them, I believe.
Right.
We have difficulty getting the fabricators to change their various jigs and so on to make these special rails when we have an accident, because each one is different and they do have an added cost if they're going to do this.
You can't carry spares for these kind of things because you never know what's going to be destroyed.
Yeah, that's correct. All these bridges have different standard and different length rails, and I guess that's the way our system seems to work.
When do you think the Spatzum one will in fact be repaired with proper rails?
I would hope within the next couple of weeks. I was talking to our Assistant Deputy Minister about this day before yesterday, yesterday it was, and he is putting some pressure on that we try and get the delivery of these as soon as possible.
Good. Now how about 9 Mile Canyon, where we showed the wooden strips between the broken fence?
The same thing there, Jack. We're attempting to get these rails as quickly as we can, and as soon as we do get them, we'll be putting them back into place.
Just one last question, Bob, although I know this was covered by Steve in his interview. We do have 24-hour sanding coverage in the winter, don't we?
That's correct, yes. We have 24-hour coverage 7 days a week. There are 2 people on each of these shifts, and when they find that there's a storm coming in and they need assistance, the assistance is there, and we augment the crews. Well, I'm very grateful for your cooperation, and if we can get the message across that despite guardrails or despite double lines or despite anything else, in the final analysis it depends on the speed that the driver's traveling and the manner in which he is driving. Right? That's correct. I believe that that's what the Motor Vehicle Act says in Section 19, that the driver should drive according to the conditions. That's right. And
We hasten to say that sometimes drivers run into conditions they don't expect around the corner in the Fraser Canyon.
Because were you saying that conditions could change, and how quickly and what space of time or distance?
Well, we have had operators go out and patrol through, and things are fine, and they go back an hour later, and there are icy sections where we get a freezing rain in one particular section.
Grateful for your cooperation. Perhaps the people who are watching this morning will drive a little bit slower through the canyon if there is any doubt about the conditions.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you very much, Bob Veitch, Operations Manager for the Highways Department. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'd like to speak for the ordinary passenger driver on that road.
Right.
We used to live in the interior, and we've traveled it many times. If you drive the posted speed limit, you're holding up traffic.
I'm afraid so.
Generally.
I'm afraid so.
And in summer, the recreation vehicles slow traffic, and they don't have the courtesy to move over into the slow lane, and they really hold things up.
It happens all the time. I had a narrow escape from death myself the other side of, I think it's Kanaka Creek. Coming back from Kamloops, and it was entirely my fault the last time. A dog crossed the road, and I slowed for it, and then the dog's owner darted out, and I put my brakes on at 65 miles an hour, went round 3 times, finished in the ditch, bounced out again, finished in the opposing highway facing towards a giant trailer truck. I managed to move out of its way about 25 seconds before it slapped through where I would have been. Terrifying.
Well, that's rather hairy.
But it teaches you a lesson. Doesn't matter if
one
you...
other point I'd like to make is that the transport traffic is always heavy on that stretch.
I know.
That
And
highway.
one critical word, some of the employers of the truckers demand more than their pound of flesh. And a man may be carrying 2 semi-trailers behind him, and he's making about 8 or 10% extra for his work while the employer is collecting double for the work, and of course the driver is pushing with these incredible, I think they call them V trains or B trains or something. And I'm maybe not quite so sure that all the trucks are as safe as the employers or the owners should make them.
Well, I found them a particular hazard if you're driving at night. There's a lot of transport traffic there in the daytime, but they barrel out at night.
Thank you, ma'am. It was a good report anyway. I'll tell you. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Jack, I drive one of those B trains you're talking about.
Is it B train or V train?
B as in Bob.
B as in Bob, yeah?
Yeah. Although I don't drive the Fraser Canyon as much anymore, I drive the Hope Princeton. The Department of Highways up there seems, well, a lot of drivers that I talked to on that road would rather drive the Hope Princeton in the wintertime.
Why?
Well, they're prepared for the snow up there.
Well, the Canyon's a better highway.
Yeah, but they're prepared for the snow on the Hope Princeton. They're out there a lot of times. They know where there's going to be ice. Now, they come by, it's bare and wet. There's no ice, but they still sand it. Even now, they're up there, the road is dry, and they sand that corner because they figure there's about a 50% chance that it is going to freeze and ice.
Why would that be? Why would the Hope Canyon be more predictable than the Hope Princeton be more predictable than the Fraser Canyon?
Well, they've got more equipment up there. And it's a shorter distance.
So you will drive the Hope Princeton as a matter of safety, not distance?
Yeah, well, we only go to Princeton. But with cars and trucks, I find there's a lot. Like, there was an incident that happened to me just coming into Hope last Friday night. I was going up the last hill before you get over the top into the town of Hope, and there was a pickup truck driving about 40 miles an hour, 50-mile-an-hour zone. So that's fine. I hung back, and I was empty. I don't carry a load going up. So we got around past Silver Creek, and I pulled into the passing lane and started to pass him.
Mm-hmm.
I got about 3/4 of the way past him.
And he put his foot down?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he started to speed up. So then...
Oh, enough of that. I haven't time for the story. I know exactly what happened. Thanks for your interest in the program this morning. And all we can do is say to people, for God's sake, drive sensibly and sanely, especially on the Fraser Canyon. Thank you very much. I'll take a break. I've got to get a chance to say this piece. There are mutterings of discontent because of recent appointments by the Attorney General's office, Alan Williams. Can't get a hold of him these days, but I will get a hold of him one of these days. They've appointed 2 new big shots in the AG's department, which is already jammed with big shots. An Assistant Deputy Minister by the name of Robin Bourne. Bourne is a fascinating character. He was advisor to Trudeau and the federal cabinet on subversive activities. Came from British intelligence, I believe, some time ago. He's in 007. And he's going to be an assistant deputy minister responsible for all police functions in the AG's department. Why do we need such a man? We've got the BC Police Commission. We've got CLU. We've got we've got the RCMP division. And now we've got a new top cop, whom I'm going to call 007, Robin Bourne, to supervise everybody. And then there's another guy called Adamson, God knows where he came from, who is going to be some other assistant deputy minister with policy and planning. Why do we need all these extra highly paid police officials? Perhaps Mr. Williams can give us a good explanation. Can't be to deal with the KKK. Well, this fuss about the KKK, all that needs to be done in that case is apply the law, and don't let the hysterical people on either side on to scream, rant and rave on radio, television, or in the newspapers. Matter of fact, you'd think the Vancouver Sun a couple of days ago was trying to whip up race riots in Vancouver. Not by design, but just by their ill-considered happenstance. Now, story in the province this morning, which we're following today, which will cause a number of people to worry because of PCBs in transformers in some downtown office buildings. 5, supposedly. The story in the province this morning says, we can't tell you the buildings because the information is confidential. I just spoke to Doug Wilson, the Senior Program Officer with the Environment Protection Service of Canada. It's not confidential, but I haven't got names of all the 5 buildings yet. I'll give them to you tomorrow. Now, why should people be worried about PCBs in downtown office buildings? Because in Binghamton, somewhere in the States, there was a fire on PCBs with this dangerous dioxin in it, and the fire released this carcinogenic substance. And that's a building that people can only go into now wearing protective clothing. Should people in the downtown office buildings in Vancouver be concerned? Probably yes. Depends on the amount of fire protection which is given to these PCB transformers in these buildings. And the regulations have since been changed. No more will be installed. What I don't know yet is whether or not these PCB transformers have to be taken out. There is, however, because of the high standards of fire protection in Vancouver, no cause for panic or alarm. I'll follow it through and hopefully give you a detailed report tomorrow. Don't promise things you can't deliver, Webster, but might do. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Jack, when you get into this PCB thing and you start asking those that really know, can you ask them why in a water table area there are PCB canisters used as insulating material?
Because it's a very effective coolant, and only recently have they come up with other ones, including mineral oil.
Yeah, I realize that, but in the job that I'm in, I reported it to our safety committee of an area that's in a water table area that had PCB canisters. Not because of the fire hazard that I just learned about now, but we were told that there was absolutely no danger at all. And I don't like, it bothers me to see it in a water table area right near Capilano Lake, near the dam, or relatively.
One, it's got to get in there. They're hermetically sealed. The danger comes from damage in a major disruption of some kind, I think.
That's correct. But
anyway, I'll try and follow it through, but I've only got 2 sets of heads and 2 sets of hands and arms today, and many things to do.
Okay.
But I'll do the best I can on it, I do promise you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Well, that was a good show this morning, if I say so myself. If I enjoyed it, you had better like it or lump it. I'll be back after the break. I do believe we have a battle with another cabinet minister scheduled for tomorrow morning.
That's right, but this one's going to be here live. It's Mr. McClellan, the Minister of Energy. He'll be talking about West Coast transmission and where to build and how to build a pipeline.
Attempting to defend the route which Ed Phillips says is the wrong route to Vancouver Island for natural gas. 9 a.m. precisely. Hold it. I'm wondering if Labour Minister Heinrich will do anything about BC's labour crisis. Is Labour Minister Heinrich an absolutely... Will Labour Minister Heinrich do anything about the labour strife?